Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to Step Up Talks. Today we are going to look at conflict in a relationship, and specifically parent-child relationship, because these are continuation from what we discussed last week. And in studio with me, I have two guests, experts in that particular field, and they will introduce themselves before we get into the nitty-gritty of today's session. My name is Anne Wafula. I'm your host/moderator. Karibu sana. I'll start with the lady. Ladies go first. Let's get to hear your name and what you do.
Good afternoon. I am very happy to be here. My name is Anne Gakuya. I'm a counseling psychologist and I work with families. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Lawrence, you know him from last week, but he'll introduce himself again. Karibu sana, Lawrence.
Thank you so much, Anne. It's nice to be here with two wonderful ladies who share one name with one letter difference in spelling.
Yeah.
I'm Lawrence. I was so happy to be here last time and happy to be back. I'm a counseling psychologist as well. I also work a lot with teens and young adults, but also children. And it's always good to have these forums and share and learn about how to make life better and more fulfilling. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much. Now, today we want to look at conflict. You know, at times people think conflict might be this huge thing, but I'm sure from the definition and from what we are going to discuss, we are going to understand conflict from different perspectives. So before we get into that discussion, probably you can just help us understand what is conflict and probably what is conflict resolution. I'll start with you, Lawrence.
Thank you. It's important to start from there to understand, at least have a basic definition. We all know what conflict is. We would generally describe it as a serious disagreement or a clash of views between different parties. Can be two parties or more, but it's when we have this clash between, so we experience a kind of incompatibility of views. I have a view, you have a view, or you're looking at something differently, and I'm looking at something else differently, and the two views are becoming incompatible. And so that causes that sort of conflict. Sometimes it's also not just incompatibility, it's when we feel like we are being hindered. I want to do something or go a particular direction, and I'm feeling hindered. So in our context, as we're looking at parent-child, it can be both ways. A child can feel hindered by the parent, or what the child is trying to process, they feel it's incompatible with what the parent is trying to do. And the vice versa can also happen. And this is something that's common, it happens a lot. When it comes to conflict resolution, we are trying to resolve. It's this process where the two parties or different parties are working to find a peaceful resolution, to bring these two views together, or to understand the hindrances and how to remove them, while still maintaining their uniqueness, their points of view, but at least bringing the views together, understanding them, and sort of finding a peaceful way of bridging the differences. So that's what we are trying to do. Understand conflict and understand that this is a process. Resolving it is a process. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I think now I get what you're saying about the echo. So if we are not speaking, let's mute our mics to avoid the echo, because I could hear the echo. And let me just come to you in terms of conflict. Is there any addition to what Lawrence has shared in terms of definition?
Not because he has really captured what we mean when we talk about conflict. In very simple terms, that's a clash of interest. So we may find two people fighting. It could be verbal, physical. It could be, they are disagreeing about something. So it's really captured what conflict is.
Okay, thank you. Now, just moving on, what could be some of the potential or possible causes of conflict? And I'll start with you, Anne.
Thank you so much, Anne. I want first to highlight what I believe is the most common or major cause of conflict, which I'll say it's communication. When we start with communication, then probably someone feels not heard, not understood, or misunderstood. So the basis of conflict could start there. The other causes are probably expectations, that there is an expectation that someone has on you, and probably you're not willing or not able to meet that particular expectation. That also could bring conflict. So when we look at conflict in terms of family, parents with their children, poor role modeling, that also could cause the way you're parenting. When we talk about parenting styles, so those are some of the things that I can say they could be major reasons why we experience conflicts in families.
Oh, you're not unmuted.
Sorry, sorry about that. I was saying that in terms of the explanation, the causes of conflict, I like how you've highlighted it. Now, probably just to ensure that our audience actually understands what you mean when you say communication is a problem or expectations, could you probably illustrate with an example that can help put it into context?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So I will focus on communication, probably between a parent and a child. The first thing is a parent will communicate at their level of reasoning and understanding. And sometimes we forget that children have not developed cognitively. That's based on the age of the child, yeah? So what you communicate and what the child is receiving or getting could be two different things. And so if a child is not able to accurately get the kind of communication that a parent is sending out there, of course the response or the reaction will be different from the expectation of the parent. Then you see, it's very easy for a conflict to stem from there, because the parent feels, why are you not listening to me? I told you to do this. Why didn't you do it? Or why did you do this instead of this? So you see, probably because how communication was channeled, that now would be one reason that conflict will arise from that. Had there been clear communication, then there would not have been conflict.
Coming to expectation, probably also just an illustration on that.
All right. So again, when we talk about expectations, so I want to think something like we have all our family values, standards that we have set. They are probably spoken or unspoken. You know, each family have their own rules that they follow, whether they are written down on paper or in their hearts, but they are there. So probably we can be talking about an expectation that this family, when I talk like maybe, let's say a teenager, who they're getting into their 15, 16, and they decide they can make their own choices and decisions, and maybe they don't want to maybe participate going to church. And then there's a Christian family, and says everyone has to go to church on Sunday. And this one feels, I can choose if I want to go to church or not. So again, that expectation that has been set, but then this one doesn't find it, may find this unreasonable. Why am I being forced to do this? You see, so that can bring conflict. There are things like maybe they want to do a tattoo, you don't want that to happen. Even basic things like chores in the house, you see. So the parent expects, now I need you to be doing this and do this, but this one just doesn't think maybe the way you want things done. They don't want to do it. They still will do it, but they have a different way of doing it. So you want chores to be done immediately after people are done with their food, but probably this one wonders, why can't I wait and rest and do it later? See? So the expectations that sometimes people may have could also result into conflict.
Thank you so much. That puts a lot of clarity. And just coming to you, Lawrence, maybe there are things that you could also add or share in terms of some of the possible causes when it comes to conflict.
Thank you. And I think I just like how Anne has boiled it down to the foundational issue, that it is communication, because the differences of opinion or goals or perception are not necessarily what caused the conflict. It's our inability to bring these two together. So like Anne was saying, it's always important for us to remember as parents and also as the kids who are watching this.
Sorry, Lawrence, just a sec. And kindly mute because they still echo. You forgot.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I was saying we all need to remember as parents and as children, as kids, teens growing up, that when we say communicate, it does not just mean pass information. So it's not just saying this is what I want. It is trying to help the other person understand what you're meaning, and the other party actively trying to understand. So there's a lot of empathy, and I think that is the cause that I would point out, that there is a lot of lack of empathy. People don't practice empathy, and empathy means actively putting yourself in the other person's shoes, entering their world, trying to see things from their point of view. And this is not just on the parents, it is also on us as children, us as young people, teenagers, trying to really ask yourself, how exactly does my mom think of this? I mean, why does she see my dropping out of school as such an issue? Because, you know, for you, maybe you're thinking, I'm dropping out to follow my goals and dreams, and she's or he is going crazy over that. But you're really just seeing it from your point of view and feeling frustrated. So lack of practicing empathy, that's really what helps us to communicate. So I think for me, I would really point that out as a major cause of conflict, as a foundational one. All these other causes, like you know, a difference in opinion, or I want to do things this way, difference in tastes and preference, all those things are real because we are unique. I have different tastes and predilections, and so does someone else. But the issue is, am I really able to put myself in that other person's worldview and see things from their wavelength, at least to help me understand where they are coming from? Otherwise, without that communication and the empathy, all these other things now become problems and potential causes of conflict. So that's a really good foundational place for us to all start at. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. And you know, just listening to you, it sounds so simple in terms of the background of conflict. It sounds very simple, but yet it's not as simple as it sounds. So probably we can now look at, yes, the conflict has a reason, because we are human, and as you said we are unique. Each has different perceptions, different ways of looking at things. So this conflict is either building up or it has happened. What are some of the strategies that we might want to employ if conflict actually arose or is on the verge of arising? So I'll start with you, Lawrence. Probably you can just talk to us. What are some of the strategies that we can employ to deal with potential conflict before it arises? Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think maybe many in the audience have been waiting for just this part. What do I do? Because in many of these forums, people want the practical, just can you get to this? But it's important to look at all these other ways of understanding, because it helps before we get to the strategies. When we look at strategies, it's important to think of conflict in terms of before the conflict, during, and after. And the before really matters, really matters. We know conflict is inevitable because we are unique, as we've kept saying, but the before really matters. And so there are foundational things that we need to have at the back of our mind as we are approaching this question. So I think in terms of dealing with potential conflicts between parents and children, I think the first thing is knowing, understanding, and accepting that conflicts will happen because my children are unique. I am not trying to make a photocopy of my children, and children should not try to make a photocopy of their parents. They have to rubber stamp and agree with what I want. I think, first of all, just having that understanding. There is uniqueness, there will be potential conflicts, and just having that at the back of your mind. I think that's the first thing before even conflicts begin. I think the second important thing is to understand how conflict affects us before you think of the strategy you will employ. So in a nutshell, which really should be explored at a later time in-depthly, anytime we get into a conflict, our minds biologically, it's a biological thing, get triggered. And I'm using that word in quotes. Our brain and I'm putting it in very layman's language, different centers of our brain respond to different things. So there is what we call prefrontal cortex, the front part, which is more to do with reasoning and imagining, thinking of consequences. But when we get into a conflict, this part stops working. And the part that starts working is what is at the back, things like amygdala and whatever. We usually, when I'm talking to children, I just tell them downstairs brain. The downstairs brain takes over. And what the downstairs brain does in our body is about survival, fighting. It's that instinct of fight or flee. So I'm no longer thinking rationally because I'm already triggered. I'm feeling angry. And that is making my downstairs tick, which means at that point, reasoning becomes very hard. And that is true mainly for small children, and that is where they will throw a tantrum. If you have a small child, you know, they will throw a tantrum, they go crazy, and that is a biological thing. The more you grow up, the more you are able to control that. But teenagers will do the same. They are going through all these emotional changes, hormones in their body, and so they get very triggered, and the downstairs takes over. And even adults, and I really emphasize this because we mainly think of it only as children. Even us as parents, we get angry. Why did you come late? And maybe you've had a hard day at work, stressed. You also triggered. This part stops functioning. Your downstairs takes over. Your voice starts going up. You already start using words that you never thought you ever existed in your vocabulary, and you're just going crazy. It's because this part is taking over. So understanding that is so important. And it also helped me a lot, even as a counselor and as a person, knowing that when I'm getting into a conflict and I can foresee it coming, I need to sit and keep reminding myself, upstairs brain, consciously and intentionally reminding myself, upstairs brain, because I need to be more rational instead of just being on my survival instincts and trying to push my agenda. So I think it's, again, this is still part of the before. How do I understand how conflict is affecting me? So what do? I think part of before is you have this understanding, set some rules. Set some rules between you and your child. Rules which both of you have to accept and live by. So it is not rules being imposed, like let's say maybe by the parent. It is rules you sit down, talk, and agree and show the reasoning why. And some of these rules can mean something like, if I am triggered and I really feel triggered, I am unable to sustain a good, rational conversation right now, I'll take a time out. And I will say, I think I'm very angry right now. Maybe I need to go to my room for 5 minutes, agree on what the time limit should be, because it also shouldn't be taking a time out for 1 week. A time out, maybe some few minutes, think, be calm, agree on things you will not do. We won't raise our voices, for example. I will explain my point of view. I will try to understand. Help me see what the problem is. See, these are rules that you're trying to come up with before the conflict even starts. And so when you see the conflict coming, you can already engage the rules. So this has been done before. So it really helps by the time you're getting to during the conflict. So in a nutshell, I would say, understand conflict. We are unique. We don't need to make photocopies of each other. Understand that conflict actually biologically affects how our bodies are functioning, so that we don't just think people are acting out. The acting out is being caused from somewhere. And then set some rules, some ground rules on how conflict should be managed. Things that can be said, what can be said, taking a time out and stuff like that. That's in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow. Personally, there are things I've learned. Now I know. You said upward brain or upstairs?
Yeah, upstairs brain and downstairs.
Brain. So now I know upstairs brain, logical. You're not bringing emotions and all. So thank you for that. Now I'll invite Councillor Anne. Probably just take us, if you have something to add to what Lawrence has mentioned, you can do so. And then link it now to the aspect of Now the conflict is happening. During the conflict, what are some of the strategies that somebody can employ to be able to deal with it? Because you've missed the before, maybe the triggers, you are not very conscious about it, you didn't have ground rules, it has happened. How do you deal with it?
Thank you so much, Anne and Councillor Lawrence, for how you've taken us through that. Yes, now conflict has happened. I like something that Lawrence has really brought up about accepting first our differences. And our personalities are so different. And you realize that in families, we have children who are very different. We can have a child who is so strong-willed. They want to keep pushing things to have their own way. And then we have this other child who is so quiet and timid. So if you have like those two types of children in your house, you realize that the quiet one, you rarely have a lot of conflict because they want to avoid trouble, problems, so they are good. They obey, they follow instructions, and they are the darlings. And then we have this strong-willed child who just want to do things their own way. And so most likely you find that conflict will keep arising because they want their way, you want to assert your way. So one thing I want to talk about when we talk about how conflict has happened, what do you do? I want first to focus, just allow me to focus to children so that I bring it out very clear. So as a parent, when you talk to children, get to their level. And get into their level not only in tone, language, but don't tower top on top of them. Like don't stand looking down on them, feeling so tall and intimidating, you know, but get to the child's level. Squat if you have to, or get seated. So you maintain the eye contact with your child. So that's the first thing you do. Then when you're at that level, communicate understanding of their feelings. They are throwing tantrums, they are angry, they are crying, or they're simply disrespectful or not listening to you. So try to acknowledge their feelings and communicate that. So, and this also will go even to adults. Just say, I realize, or I see that you're very upset, or I can see you're so sad, or I can see you're in pain, you know. Communicate the feelings and let them feel understood. So let them feel, oh, so mommy understands that I'm so angry, or daddy understands I'm in pain, you know. Once you get now to their level, then you're communicating their feeling, then encourage them to talk. And also get also your chance to express yourself and explain yourself. So ask the child, so what exactly happened? Probably you had given a task or you had an expectation that was not met. So get first to understanding why this child did not do that, because they always have reasons, and some reasons are so good. You know, sometimes we punish and you later realize that the motive was right, only that it came out wrongly, the action. So try to seek, why did you do this? Also seek clarity. Let them know we discussed about this. I told you that I wanted to do the chores, that I needed the house clean. So what happened? So instead of coming and you all over, why didn't you do this? You never listen, you don't obey. First find out what happened. Then give them the chance to express themselves, to explain. Let them tell you what happened. So out of that explanation, then find out if they knew the right thing to do, or if it was a problem they encountered, is there any way they would think of resolving that problem? Probably you told them you want the house clean, and then they realized there was no soap. You probably thought there was some soap, then there wasn't. Then they decide we don't wash house without soap, so I will wait for mommy, and then maybe I can wash later when she comes. So you find out. So the next time I give you a chore and you realize that there is a need, what should you do? So you're also checking their knowledge of how do we work out a problem. And if something is, there is an expectation, what do I need to do if I come across an obstacle? So you check the understanding first. Then the next thing you check the understanding is come to an agreement. Come to an agreement about that. So the next time I ask this of you, so what do you think you need to do? Then let them tell you. Then continue ask them, but suppose this and this happens, what should you do? Keep checking the understanding. Once you're clear that they fully understand, and you see that their suggestions and what they're communicating is also as per your expectation, then agree on the way forward. So what do you think we need to do from here? So most likely, if the conflict was something that needs an apology, then probably an apology can be given. If it was still a task that needs to be done, then you can encourage the task to be done. So a word of caution is that when you're dealing with conflict, we have to be aware of our own feelings and emotions. You don't try to solve conflicts when you're so upset or when you're feeling so angry. It is good for you to be aware of how you feel. So in case you realize that you're very upset, don't try to solve conflict at that time. Express your feelings. Say right now, I am feeling very upset, or I'm feeling very angry, or I'm not in a position to discuss this in a very calm way. So I will let you know when we can talk about this. Whether you're dealing with an older child, whether you're dealing with a young one, don't try to solve conflicts when you are upset. So I feel that if you can follow that, like get to the child's level, get understanding, let them understand, you understand why that happened, then try to seek feedback, and then seek for clarity and plan on the way forward. I feel those are very simple strategies, but they work. They're very effective, they work.
Wow, thank you. As you are sharing that, I could see the gaps in some ways. The way at times the way you are handling conflict, I could see some gaps. Now I know better. Thank you. There is one step left in terms of these strategies. The conflict has happened. Probably it has ended. Maybe we chose to hide our heads under the sand like the ostrich or something. We chose to sweep it under the carpet. What happens after that? So probably somebody thinks, it wasn't a big deal or something. What happens after the conflict? Or maybe we have sorted it out well. We've followed the steps that were given by Councillor Anne. We've followed and we've actually come to a consensus. What could happen? So probably, Lawrence, you can take us through two possible scenarios where the conflict actually arose and it has been sorted. How do you manage the after? And where probably it arose, but we chose to ignore, so it has just disappeared with time. How do we manage that post-conflict period? Thank you.
Thank you also. That was so wonderful what Anne was sharing. And I just thought about when she said getting to the child's level and communicating the feelings. And maybe I can just add, because we said communicating means we have to make sure that it's understood. Also, your facial expressions matter. Don't tell a child, I can see you upset and your face is this way. Show the we call it the upsettedness. Show that you're actually seeing it. Like, oh, I can see, if it's a small child, even your facial expressions need to change. I know you're so angry. I can feel it must be so frustrating. I know, because they will really connect. And by the way, do it sincerely, not pretending. And the same thing if it's a teenager. Also show them, yeah, I can imagine. That is so frustrating. How could that teacher have done that? How did you feel? I can imagine how that. Let them see that I'm really feeling I'm understood. And not just by being insincere, you're actually feeling, you're imagining, because you've also personally experienced such kind of situations. So it's important that even how we communicate it is really seen, even in our emotions. So, wow, that was just amazing. And even as a counselor, just listening to that still reminds me of all my training and how sometimes we don't do it even as counselors. And we really need to practice. I think now the after, what you're raising, what do you do now after the conflict? So maybe the conflict is resolved, and maybe I should point out, not all conflicts are resolved completely. We said it's a process. And so sometimes you may get to a point and feel we are at an impasse. we are not agreeing on the way forward, but we can agree on what to do. Let's take 4 days, think through this. I want you to think about this, and I'll think about this. Then we will come back and see how far we've gotten. So there is that part for dealing with the after. There is also the issue of personal reflection, which is really what I wanted to highlight for both parents and children. But let me start with parents. Anne brought out something about the uniqueness of even our personalities. As a parent, you may have realized I have this child who he's a contrarian. He will argue any point. You know, you'll say something and he will argue. Even things that have, sit on this side of the car, or you open the door, sit here, and they are disagreeing. It's a problem. I don't want to. And you may have noticed that he's a contrarian. He keeps disagreeing with everything. Maybe there could be an underlying issue. Maybe it is his way of acting out. Maybe he's communicating something without knowing what he's communicating. So this is the part about reflection. How exactly am I handling this? Is there something else larger that's happening? Or maybe it's the developmental stage. Children, as Anne said, everybody reasons. There is no one who didn't do something. There was a reason. And maybe you're realizing that my son is maybe 16 or 14, is in high school. He never does chores. He'll go and play with his friends instead. Maybe my child has not yet learned to be assertive. He's not being assertive. He's not able to stand on his own principles. Maybe I need to now proactively begin talking to him about that. That's also something for the after, when you are reflecting on it. And so these are the things that you do after a conflict. You keep reflecting. Could that have been handled better? Are there patterns I see in the kinds of conflicts we are having? And what are the unique patterns I notice? So maybe I need to teach my child more on assertiveness, or maybe my child is not disciplined. He does not follow a structure. So you keep having these issues of his day is very disorganized. Maybe I need to have conversations about him, about how do you organize your day so that you do this and you still do what you want and everything flows smoothly and you avoid future conflicts. So I think with the after, it's more of reflecting on what has happened, trying to notice patterns and how to avoid them in future. And at the same time, I would say practicing repeatedly what we are saying, and especially on yourself. When Anne pointed out that don't try and resolve some conflicts when you are also very triggered. You're so angry, don't resolve. Just follow your rules and say, I feel I'm too angry right now. I don't think I may say things or do things that are not right. Let me just take my time out. We talk about this later. But I think one rule we should always follow is don't pile up conflict. If there is something that's continuously bothering you as a parent or even you as a child, don't pile it up, because eventually it will affect your other emotions and it will blow up. Don't pile up conflict. And it is okay, and I will say it is okay to bring up a conflict that seemed solved and maybe now you feel wasn't solved. Don't leave it as an unfinished business. Even if it has been 2 months down the line and you're still feeling aggrieved by what your parent did or what your child did, it is still okay to bring it up and say, over the past few days, I've really realized that I'm still upset about our conflict 2 months ago. I'm still feeling like what you said, it really hurt me. It is still okay to bring it up because we don't want to pile up conflict. And it is a process. So I would say with the after is keep reflecting. Please try and identify patterns. And patterns, I mean even things like, when are you most likely to be upset? For instance, I find generally, and I think even in research, parents are most likely to be upset after work. So if you're there and your child and your teenager listening to this, please don't bring up that conflict when they are coming from work. You will most probably not win and things will be worse. So it's after work or So you just need to find out. Or sometimes if you are a parent, you may realize at 8 to 9, there is this series that my son keeps watching, and that is the time you're choosing to address an issue. Please don't. That is a pattern you've already noticed. This doesn't work. Let me wait for a boring time. I'll sacrifice watching news because maybe they don't care about news, and we'll talk about it then. So these are the patterns I keep thinking after that we need to keep reflecting. Are there patterns I see? If my child is an introvert, because introverts also have conflicts, how do I best approach it? And I make sure that they are sharing, their true feelings and thoughts. If my child is an extrovert and his attention span is not that, how do I put it, that very long, how do I deal with it while still keeping him engaged? Let me just give a small example and then someone else can share. I have a parent who had a child who was really extroverted, a lot of energy. And anytime you talk to him, his attention span is short. So the parent will talk, complain, and the child will look like they are listening. And then all of a sudden the child will say, umeona hiyo kitu kwa news? Have you seen that thing in the news? So it's in the middle of the discussion. And you can imagine how the parent becomes triggered by that. You are not even listening as I was talking. And so we had to work on how do you address this while still maintaining their concentration. So these are just some of the nuances that we need to think about. A lot of reflection after a conflict. Let me stop there for now.
Thank you so much. And quite some insights there. And just as you are sharing that, I was just wondering, probably just an addition in terms of the unresolved issues. Maybe we think we've resolved, but at one point in the future, we want to bring it back. How then do I do that without my child or the person I'm having conflict with thinking that I'm just revisiting an issue that probably should not be revisited? Because there could be a thin line between trying to bring to a conclusion, getting closure on the issue, and somebody thinking you're being petty. Maybe you can just clarify that a bit.
Yes, that is important because there is a thin line there. And I would say for now, I think it's about language and also the pattern that you've created over time. So if your child has learned and you as a parent have learned to trust that this is coming from a good place, it may not necessarily evoke a lot of negative emotions, but mainly it's the language. It is how we choose to express it. Because I get what you're saying, and I'm sure even the audience understands. You know, when you're having a discussion and someone says something like, "We hata unafanyanga hivi," and then they bring up that other thing. You know, you keep doing this, or even last time you said this. That's just the wrong way to approach it, and that means you're already upset, triggered. This part is no longer thinking. What you need to do is bring it up like it is a discussion and choose your language. Like say, I've realized that over the past few months, I've been thinking about that thing that we talked about, and I'm not bringing it up to beat you down or to simply revisit old wounds, but I think I'm realizing something happened today, and it made me still feel hurt about that. You see how that comes out? It communicates that you are not just bringing this up with any malicious sort of intent. So it shows that it is an issue that maybe is still unresolved, but you're very much willing to resolve it. And you're still maintaining the integrity of this person and the relationship. So I think it's the language that we will use when we are addressing this issue. I think also you can ask them their views about it. You know, have you thought about it yourself? And if they say no, you can tell them what you have thought about. And always remember, own your feelings. Own your feelings. Don't put it on the other person. Even if it is something you are realizing maybe was unresolved, and you're bringing it out as a reflection. I've been thinking about this, and you are owning. It is I language. I feel, or this is what it brought out in me. So you're owning the language. It's not that you're just heaping it on the other person. So I think you've cultivated a good relationship that allows for this. And at the same time, the language that you will use when you're bringing it up is what really matters. Yeah.
Okay, so basically it boils down to the aspect of how we relate to each other, the trust issues that we talked about last week, just ensuring that everything is going accordingly. That is, by the way, I've learned a lot. And as a parent, I'm seeing gaps because I have one very extroverted kid and another one very introverted. So what Anne mentioned, I can see the gaps. So probably as we come to the end, I'll come to you, Councillor, and maybe you can just give us your parting shot, having gone through this and shared, what could be your parting shot to anybody who has listened to this show?
Thank you so much, Anne. And I want to give my parting shot capturing something Lawrence have said about owning our feelings. When we talk about conflict, I also want to encourage own your feelings. You can't blame that other person for how you feel. You can't say you made me feel so angry, you made me feel so upset. Own your feelings. Say what you have done or what you have said have made me feel so upset. Because the moment we start blaming others for how we feel, of course they go to their defensive. So let us own our feelings. When a conflict happens, it is okay for you to let that other person know that if they feel the conflict have been well resolved, and let them know that it is okay to discuss it at a later date if they still feel like there is an issue as far as that conflict is concerned. And when you're dealing with a conflict, let both of you be in a state where you allow each other to freely express how you're feeling and how you'd want to resolve future conflicts. So whether it is a parent as a child, let the child know the expectation you have. Let them know that in case the expectation is not met, how should we go about this if this happens in future? So once that is very clear, then what we are saying is we are expecting conflict will happen, but we also have come into an agreement of how do we handle conflicts when they happen. And that I think that clarity puts everyone in a safe space where sometimes you don't have to be defensive or you don't have to feel like you fight your way. You are in this space of feeling like I want to listen and I want to understand also the other side, and then look at a very amicable way of solving this issue that is between us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Quite insightful. It's only that we've run out of time. Councillor Lawrence, what could be your parting shot?
Yeah, the time just seems to fly when we are discussing these things.
Yeah,
I think I would just say part of what I said last time is to remind, especially parents, that a good parent is made, not born. This is a process. We are all learning. I assure you, one time we should do a session where myself and Councillor Anne are confessing the mistakes we've made. Because even being counselors, you can still see gaps, even when you have studied. So never feel discouraged. If maybe right now you're really going through a rough period with your children, it seems like there's a lot of conflict, remember that this is a process. And the first thing is for you to be aware and to really start working on yourself and practicing these things. Like, I just want to give you an assignment, which maybe we should be doing every time. The assignment here is upstairs brain, not downstairs. And be on the lookout for any time you're beginning to feel triggered. The minute you're starting to feel my heart is racing, I'm becoming angry, my breath, I'm starting to have a short breath, like I'm breathing very quickly. Those are already things that are telling you that your downstairs is already engaging for survival. Now you are on the defense. You want to fight this child, either using words or punishment or anything. So my assignment would be start noticing and find a word. For myself, it's usually like a mantra. I usually say things like calm, calm, calm in my head to remind I am okay. I don't need to go on the defensive. Let me stay rational. So I would give that as an assignment to us. Let us practice using our upstairs brain, which means being very aware. I can see this conflict from far. I see it is coming. my brain is already making me get on the defensive biologically. Or I can see my child, and my child is already beginning to get on the defensive, get angry. You can see their facial expressions, and in yourself, you're realizing if their downstairs takes over, I have to lend my upstairs for them. So let me get them to use their upstairs. Let me get them calm. How do I do that? Maybe I need to change my language, my tone. Maybe our voices have started raising. Go down completely. You're trying to get them back to the upstairs. So maybe that is an assignment for all of us. Let's be on the lookout. Good parents are made, they are not born. It's a process. Don't feel very discouraged. And you can always reach out for help to a counselor, to a friend, share with them, get some insights. And watch this show every single day. It is has all these insights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Lawrence. Thank you so much, Councillor Anne. Quite an insightful show. And Lawrence, you're very right to say we need to tune in, because it's always learning. I keep learning something new in every show. And I really want to thank you, Lawrence and Anne. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for sharing the insights, because it's not everybody who would be willing to do that. And I really appreciate that. To our audience, thanks a lot for tuning in. Keep tuning in. We try as much as possible to ensure we share information that actually adds value. And with that, we come to the end of our show today. Look out for another one. Probably next week we might decide to delve deeper into the issue of conflict and look at it from the different segments, maybe teenagers, young adults, or we could be looking at looking at relationships from now a wider perspective. So you never know what we will bring your way. So just tune in and see what we have for you. And with that, we come to the end of our session. We want to wish you a lovely weekend. See you next time. Bye-bye.